If you hold your hands too tightly, you cannot receive anything. Your fingers curl inward, forming a fist, and the world cannot place anything in a closed hand. But when you let them open, soft, unguarded, empty, suddenly everything can pass through, touch you, move you, flow around you. And this, my friends, is the great paradox of the spiritual life. Only the empty hands can touch the infinite. Most people spend their lives grasping for certainty, for identity, for security, for meaning. Their hands are always full of expectations, full of demands, full of ideas about how life should unfold. They cling to old stories like someone clutching a suitcase long after the journey has ended. But you cannot touch the infinite while holding on to the finite. You cannot feel the ocean if your hands are busy collecting shells. You cannot feel the wind if you insist on trapping it in a box. And you cannot experience the fullness of existence if you are too busy trying to possess it. Let us begin with a simple image. Imagine a cup overflowing with water. You try to drink from it, but the water spills everywhere. No matter how hard you try to take in more, nothing enters because the cup is already full. The cup must first be empty to be filled again. And so it is with you. When you are full of yourself, full of your own ideas, your own fears, your own rigid identities, there is no space left for something greater to enter. The infinite cannot fit inside a mind cramped with conclusions. So what does it mean to empty yourself? Not destruction. Not erasure. But space. Openness. Receptivity. The space between thoughts. The openness to not knowing. The receptivity to life as it is, rather than as you insist it must be. You see, the tragedy of clinging is not that you hold on to too little, but that you hold on to too much. You carry your past like a bundle of stones on your back. You hold your beliefs like weapons. You cling to your identity as though the universe might collapse if you stopped insisting on who you think you are. But the universe does not need your permission to be complete. You are the one who needs permission to rest. And the permission is granted the moment you release your grip. Now, many people misunderstand this idea. They imagine that emptying means giving up, becoming apathetic, withdrawing from life. But I am not speaking of emptiness as numbness. I am speaking of emptiness as clarity. Consider the sky. It holds clouds, storms, sunlight, rainbows, yet it remains untouched by them. It is not empty because nothing is there. It is empty because everything can pass through. This is the emptiness I speak of. The spaciousness that allows life to move, to breathe, to unfold without obstruction. When your hands are empty, they are not useless. They are ready. When your mind is empty, it is not dull. It is alive. When your heart is empty, it is not cold. It is open. But how do we come to this emptiness? Let us look at the ways we fill ourselves. We fill ourselves with possessions, not because we need them, but because we fear the space that appears when we let them go. We fill ourselves with busyness, not because the tasks matter, but because silence frightens us. We fill ourselves with opinions, not because they are true, but because uncertainty feels like death. The ego cannot tolerate emptiness. Emptiness threatens its structure, its boundaries, its story. And so the ego spends every waking moment trying to fill the space with noise, with control, with anything that keeps it from dissolving into the vastness. But, the infinite can only be touched by dissolving. It can only be known through surrender. It can only be felt in the silence that arrives when the ego stops shouting. This is why so many spiritual traditions speak of letting go, not as a moral instruction but as a practical necessity. You cannot swim while clinging to the shore. You cannot breathe freely while holding your breath. And you cannot experience the infinite while clutching the finite with trembling hands. Let me tell you a small story. A student once came to me, anxious, confused, desperate to understand the nature of awakening. He brought notebook after notebook of questions, pages filled with theories, quotes, diagrams, philosophies he had collected like a hoarder gathering trinkets. After he had spoken for nearly an hour, I asked him one simple question. Where will you put the truth if your hands are full of ideas? He stared at me, puzzled, clutching his papers as though they were life jackets. But the truth, you see, is not another idea to collect. It is the space in which all ideas come and go. To touch the infinite, you must loosen your grip on the known. Now, loosening your grip does not mean abandoning the world. You still live, act, love, work, create. But you stop demanding that life conform to your plans. You stop mistaking your preferences for universal laws. You stop trying to possess what can only be experienced. This is when something marvelous begins to happen. You start to feel the presence of life itself. Not your story of life, but life. Not your interpretation of experience, but experience. Not the filtered world of the ego, but the raw, unguarded reality of the present moment. And in that moment, the infinite becomes touchable. Not as a concept. Not as a belief. But as a living experience. When your hands are empty, you can finally feel the texture of the world. When your mind is empty, you can finally hear the silence behind thought. When your heart is empty, you can finally love without fear. This emptiness is fullness. This openness is wholeness. This surrender is strength. And this is why only the empty hands can touch the infinite. To understand this more deeply, let us turn our attention to the ways the human being tries, often unconsciously, to grasp the ungraspable. For this grasping is the very thing that prevents us from touching what is most sacred. Have you ever tried to catch sunlight with your fingers? The tighter you close your hand, the faster the light slips through. But open your hand, and the light rests gently upon your skin. This is the nature of the infinite. It cannot be held, only received. It cannot be owned, only experienced. It cannot be captured, only allowed. The ego, however, wants nothing more than to secure permanence, as though the world were some kind of museum where all beautiful moments should be preserved behind glass. The ego says, "This is mine," and clings. This must stay, and resists. This must not change, and suffers. But life is change. Life is flow. Life is movement. The infinite is not a static object, it is a dance. And you cannot join a dance while clinging to the wall. Think of love. The more you try to possess someone, the more love withers. The more you try to guarantee it, the more insecure it becomes. The more you fear losing it, the more rigid you become, and love does not flourish in rigidity. Love is the infinite touching the human heart. But it only touches hands that are open. Now, imagine approaching life the same way you approach love. Without grasping. Without demanding. Without insisting that things be different from what they are. You begin to see that the world is not something to conquer. It is something to embrace. And an embrace, my friends, requires empty arms. Let us examine how the ego tries to fill itself. Because the ego is never satisfied. It is a hunger without end. It accumulates achievements, badges, accolades, yet feels no peace. It acquires possessions, titles, roles, yet feels no completion. It builds elaborate images of success, yet feels no rest. The ego believes, if I can just add one more thing, one more victory, one more possession, then I will be enough. But this is like trying to fill a cup with holes in it. No matter how much you pour, it spills out. The cup itself must change. But the ego does not want to change. It wants to continue grasping. And yet, the more it grasps, the more it suffers. There is a profound irony here. The ego is terrified of emptiness, yet emptiness is the only thing that could free it. Because emptiness dissolves the illusion of separation. Emptiness dissolves the craving for control. Emptiness dissolves the compulsive need to define oneself. In emptiness, you discover that you were never incomplete at all. You were simply cluttered. Let us consider the nature of space. A room is not useful because of its walls, but because of the space inside them. A bowl is not useful because of its shape, but because of the emptiness it contains. Music is not beautiful because of the notes, but because of the silence between them. You, too, are made of space. Not physical space, but inner space. The space in which thoughts arise and dissolve. The space in which emotions swell and soften. The space in which experiences come and go. When that space is crowded, you suffer. When that space is open, you awaken. But remember, emptiness is not created by force. You cannot empty yourself by pushing things away. Even pushing away creates another form of grasping. Emptiness arises naturally when you stop clinging. Imagine holding a rope tightly. If someone tells you to let go, you may think you must fling your hand open. But letting go is not the act of forcing release. It is the cessation of holding. You simply stop contracting. Stop gripping. Stop insisting. And suddenly, effortlessly, the rope slips away. This is the art of touching the infinite. Not by force, but by non-resistance. Not by striving, but by relaxing. Not by addition, but by subtraction. Now, some may ask. If my hands are empty, what do I live for? What do I hold on to? But emptiness does not mean you lose the world. Emptiness means the world is no longer distorted by your fear. You still love, but without possession. You still act, but without anxiety. You still dream, but without desperation. You still live, but without clinging. You become like a bamboo flute, empty inside, so that the breath of life can make music through you. Have you ever noticed how children experience the world? Their hands are empty. Their minds are open. Their hearts are unburdened by the weight of identity. Give a child a stick, and it becomes a sword, a wand, a telescope, a fishing pole, a bridge for ants. They do not cling to the object, they dance with it. And when they are done, they drop it without regret. The child touches the infinite through imagination, through presence, through simplicity. We lose this when we grow up. We become serious. We become rigid. We become burdened. We forget the art of empty hands. But emptiness is not childishness. It is the maturity of someone who no longer fears losing what cannot be kept. The body ages. The world shifts. People come and go. Moments arise and dissolve. The infinite is the one thing that does not change. And the only way to touch it is to empty yourself of everything that pretends to be permanent. Only then can you see what has been here all along. The open sky of awareness. The spaciousness of being. The quiet pulse beneath existence. This is the paradox. When you are full, you are hungry. When you are empty, you are whole. And so, empty your hands. Not by force. Not by renunciation. But by relaxing the grasp. For when your hands are open, when your mind is spacious, when your heart is light, the infinite rushes in. Like a tide returning to the shore. As emptiness begins to awaken within you, a remarkable shift occurs, subtle at first, almost imperceptible, like the quiet turning of the tide before dawn. You begin to sense that life is not something you must chase or capture. It is something that comes to you when you make space for it. In the same way a window does not create the breeze but simply allows it to pass, the open mind, the open heart, the open hands allow the infinite to reveal itself. Let us explore this further. Most people live as though life is a negotiation. They bargain with existence. If I work hard enough. If I become the right kind of person. If I fix all my flaws. If I plan everything perfectly. Then, perhaps, life will reward them. But life is not a vending machine. It is not dispensing meaning in exchange for effort. It is not withholding peace until you solve the last puzzle. Life flows to you in the same way breath enters your lungs. Naturally, effortlessly, when you stop holding. This is why, in moments of profound clarity, moments of grief, of beauty, of surrender, you often feel something vast and indescribable wash over you. A presence. A stillness. A spaciousness that is not born from thinking. These are the moments when your hands, without your noticing, become empty. Have you ever stood at the edge of the ocean and felt time stop? Have you ever listened to music so deeply that the world dissolved? Have you ever cried until something inside you broke open and softened? Have you ever fallen into laughter so complete that you forgot the one who was laughing? In those moments, the ego relaxed. It loosened its grip. It let go of its certainties, its boundaries, its story. And what entered that space was the infinite. Not as a concept, but as a living presence. But here is the irony. People think awakening is something they must earn, like a diploma or a trophy. They imagine it as some great peak they must climb, a reward at the end of heroic discipline. But the infinite is not at the top of a mountain. It is underneath your feet. It is the ground you have always walked on. You touch it not by climbing, but by unclenching. To touch the infinite is not an achievement. It is a relaxation of the one who keeps striving for achievement. Now, let us look more closely at the nature of surrender. Many misunderstand this word. They think it means giving up, losing, admitting defeat. But surrender is not the collapse of strength, it is the release of tension. When you float in water, you do not sink because you grow more rigid. You float because you soften. Life is very much the same. When you soften, you rise. This softness is not weakness. It is resilience. It is grace. Consider the tree. The rigid tree snaps in the storm. The flexible tree bends, sways, gives way, and survives. It is precisely because it yields that it endures. When your hands are empty, they are not defenseless. They are adaptable. Responsive. Ready to receive what comes, and release what goes. This is the intelligence of emptiness. To hold lightly. To touch gently. To meet life as a dance, not a battle. Now, let us explore how this emptiness reveals itself in relationships. People often enter relationships with full hands, full of expectations, full of fears, full of unspoken demands. They grasp at each other, trying to secure permanence in a world that never stops moving. But love is not a contract. It is not a possession. It is not a promise carved in stone. Love is an openness between two beings. It is the space you offer another to exist as they are. It is the emptiness in which connection arises. Try to confine love, and it shrinks. Try to control it, and it withdraws. Try to possess it, and it suffocates. Love thrives in empty hands. Not because love lacks substance, but because love is the infinite touching the finite. It cannot be owned, only lived. Have you ever noticed that the most beautiful moments in love are often the most unguarded ones? The quiet glance. The soft laugh. The shared silence. The spontaneous gesture. These are moments when the ego steps aside, even briefly, and the heart touches life directly. And the heart, when it is empty, becomes a doorway. A passage. A bridge between the finite and the infinite. This is why love feels so mysterious. Because it is not something we generate, but something we make space for. The same is true of creativity. Writers stare at blank pages, not because they lack ideas, but because their minds are too full. Artists sit frozen, not because inspiration has abandoned them, but because they are trying too hard to create rather than allowing creation to happen. Creativity requires empty hands. It requires stepping out of the way. It requires the humility to let something larger speak through you. The painter is not the true artist. The canvas is. The musician is not the true composer. The silence is. The thinker is not the true philosopher. The space between thoughts is to touch the infinite through art, through love, through awareness. You must become hollow like a reed, clear like a mirror, open like a window. You must empty yourself of the noise, so that the music can enter. This emptying is not a technique. It is a return. A return to the part of you that was never cluttered in the first place. The infant knows this. The sky knows this. The river knows this. Your own breath knows this. You do not breathe by effort. You breathe by letting go. In the same way, you touch the infinite by letting go. Letting go of what? Not of the world. Not of responsibility. Not of desire. But of the illusion that you can hold the world in your hands. For the world is too vast, too fluid, too alive to be possessed. It moves through you like water through open fingers. And the more open you are, the more it flows, the more it nourishes, the more it reveals. This is the secret. Life is always offering itself to you. It is your grasping that keeps you from receiving. Open your hands, and the infinite rushes in. As we continue this exploration, let us look deeper into a truth that many find unsettling at first. To touch the infinite, you must be willing to lose your sense of control. Not your ability to act. Not your capacity to choose. But your illusion that life must follow the blueprint you carry in your mind. For control, as most people understand it, is simply fear in disguise. It is the fear of uncertainty. The fear of impermanence. The fear of being exposed to the vastness of life without a shield. But the extraordinary irony is this. The more you try to control life, the less life you can actually experience. A clenched fist cannot feel the texture of a feather. A mind gripping its beliefs cannot sense the subtlety of truth. A heart armored with expectation cannot touch the tenderness of love. And so, control becomes the very thing that blocks the encounter with the infinite. Consider the ocean. The waves rise and fall without consulting your preferences. The tide comes in and goes out without asking your permission. The ocean does not obey you, it simply is. Yet millions sit before the sea, feeling peace wash over them. Why? Because the ocean frees them from the burden of pretending they are in control. In its vastness, their worries become small. In its rhythm, their anxiety softens. In its power, their resistance dissolves. The infinite, you see, frees you precisely because you cannot hold it. Now imagine bringing this same openness to your own life. Imagine allowing experiences to arise, not to be grasped or rejected, but simply to be felt. Imagine meeting each moment the way the shore meets each wave. Not clinging, not resisting, but receiving and letting go. When your hands relax. When the grip softens. When the mind stops trying to fix, manage, and contain everything. The present moment reveals a depth you've overlooked your entire life. But many people are terrified of this depth. They say, if I let go, everything will fall apart. Yet the truth is often the opposite. Things fall apart because you cling to them. Just as a flower crushed in a tightened fist begins to die. Your life loses its vitality when you hold everything too tightly. Letting go is not destruction. Letting go is allowing things to breathe. Let us speak now about identity, another place where the ego fills its hands to the brim. Most people live with a story about who they are. A story built on memory, preference, childhood conditioning, social expectation. And they cling to this story as though it were carved in stone. But identity is not a sculpture. It is a river. You are not the same person you were 5 years ago. Or even 5 minutes ago. Every breath changes you. Every experience reshapes you. You are a continuity of transformations. And yet the ego says, no, I am this. This is me. This must not change. But the infinite cannot touch a rigid identity. The infinite can only touch a self that is porous, fluid, spacious. A self that listens. A self that learns. A self that allows itself to be undone and remade. To hold on to a fixed identity is like insisting that a wave remain frozen in its shape. It cannot. It must rise, crest, fall, merge, and rise again. You, too, are a wave in the ocean of existence. To empty your hands is to allow yourself to be a wave. Dynamic. Unpredictable. Alive. Now, let us turn to fear, for fear is often the final barrier between you and the infinite. People imagine fear as something that must be conquered. They think courage means overpowering it, defeating it, crushing it into submission. But fear is not an enemy. Fear is a signal, a messenger from the edge of your boundaries. It says, you are approaching the unknown. It says, you are stepping beyond the familiar. It says, you are expanding. If you meet fear with grasping, it grows larger. If you meet fear with softness, it dissolves. Fear is like a wave that appears enormous when you run from it, but shrinks to gentleness when you dive through. The infinite lies on the other side of fear. Not because fear blocks it, but because fear is the ego's response to losing its grip. And the ego, poor thing, cannot imagine a world in which it is not the center. So fear rises like a final cry. But you do not need to fight fear. You only need to stop feeding it. Stop gripping it. Stop building a home for it in your mind. Empty your hands of fear. And what remains is not void, but freedom. Freedom to move. To feel. To open. To surrender. Freedom to be touched by the infinite. Now let us look at time, another illusion the ego tries to grasp. Most people live either in memory or anticipation. Their hands are full of the past, regrets, resentments, identities long expired. Or full of the future, plans, worries, anxieties, imagined catastrophes. But the infinite can only be touched in the present moment. Not because the present is morally superior, but because the present is the only place where life is actually happening. You cannot touch a memory. You cannot touch an expectation. You cannot touch a fantasy. You can only touch this. This breath. This sensation. This sound. This heartbeat. This moment. The infinite is not elsewhere. It is here. It has always been here. It was simply buried beneath the clutter of grasping. When your hands are full of time, you lose the present. When your hands are empty, you rediscover eternity. This is the great secret of spiritual life. The infinite hides in plain sight. It is not far away. It is not waiting behind a curtain. It is not granted to the worthy. It is revealed to the empty. Empty hands. Empty mind. Empty heart. Not empty of life. Empty of the noise that obscures life. And when that emptiness blossoms, when the grip loosens, when the grasping dissolves, you begin to sense something extraordinary. The infinite has been touching you your entire life. You simply could not feel it while your hands were full. And now, as we move toward the quiet conclusion of this exploration, let us turn our attention to what arises when the hands, the mind, and the heart truly become empty. For something remarkable begins to happen. Something so subtle and yet so profoundly transformative, that once it reveals itself, you will wonder how you ever missed it. You begin to sense the presence of life not as something outside you, not as something happening to you, but as something unfolding through you. Just as the wind moves through the branches of a tree, life begins to move through the open space within you. And when it moves without resistance, without grasping, without the constant tension of me and mine, a clarity dawns. A clarity so simple that it does not require explanation. A clarity so natural that it does not require belief. A clarity so immediate that it does not require effort. It is the clarity of being. Not being someone. Not being something. Just being. And in this being, in this openness, in this vast and effortless spaciousness, you begin to sense the infinite the way a fish might sense the water. Not as an object, but as the very medium of existence. You see that you were never separate from it. You were simply distracted. Distracted by the noise of thought. By the stories of the ego. By the endless effort to secure what cannot be secured. By the tightness of hands that refuse to open. But here, in this emptiness, you discover the truth that was always waiting. You do not touch the infinite. The infinite touches you. You do not claim it. You do not grasp it. You do not achieve it. You make yourself available to it. The way a window does not create the sunlight, but allows the sunlight to pour in. The way the surface of a still pond reflects the moon. Not by effort, but by stillness. The infinite reveals itself in the same way. When the inner waters grow calm. When the clouds of thought part. When the hands loosen their grip on certainty. This is why so many meditative traditions, if you strip them of their cultural clothing, are simply about becoming still enough, empty enough, spacious enough to perceive what has always been true. Stillness is not the absence of life. Stillness is the clarity to see life. Emptiness is not a void. Emptiness is the room in which truth can breathe. Let us contemplate one final metaphor. Imagine a person standing beside a river. They reach into the moving water, cupping their hands, trying to hold it. But the more tightly they grasp, the faster the water escapes between their fingers. Frustrated, they try again. And again. And again. Only to discover they can never hold the river. And one day, exhausted from trying, they finally stop grasping. Their hands fall open. Their arms relax. And in that moment, they feel the river touch them. The water moves across their palms, their skin, their fingertips. And something inside them understands. To touch the river, I must stop trying to hold it. This is the essence of awakening. To touch the infinite, you must stop trying to own it. Define it. Capture it. Because the infinite is not a thing. It is the living movement of existence. It is the flow of being itself. It is the space in which you arise. And dissolve. And arise again. Just as waves rise and fall in the ocean. You are not separate from it. You are an expression of it. When your hands become empty, you finally feel this truth. When your mind becomes spacious, you finally see this truth. When your heart becomes open, you finally remember this truth. You remember what you have always been. An aperture through which the universe perceives itself. A channel through which the infinite expresses itself. A wave through which the ocean plays. There is no need to cling. No need to resist. No need to control. Life is not asking you to grip it. Life is asking you to join it. To participate. To move. To dance. And dancing, you see, requires open hands. Hands that can gesture. Hands that can flow. Hands that can meet the world without fear. Hands that are free to touch and be touched. Hands that are empty. For it is only with these hands that you can finally sense the delicate, immeasurable, ever-present mystery that we call the infinite. So let the grip loosen. Let the mind soften. Let the heart open. Let the hands become empty. And in that emptiness, spacious, quiet, luminous, you will discover that the infinite has been waiting for you all along.